And he says, "How are you doing?" And it often was like that with prisoners. The man I arrested for first-degree murder, the courts were so unbelievably messed up. He was sitting next to me in court, and he turned to me and he said, "Do you think I should plead guilty?" My impulse was to say, "Well, why not? You did it, you know." I thought back and I said, "They never said anything like this in the police academy. I could get in trouble if I told this guy to plead guilty, get on the stand and tell the judge, the cop told me to plead guilty." And, so I said to him, "I don't know, maybe you should get a lawyer." This was before the courts required us to say that. In any event, the other fellow that was in the cage that day said, "How have you been?" Like I was one of his long-lost cousins or something. And I said, "Fine, what are you doing in here?" And he said, "Oh, you know, you really had me. I was guilty then." He said, "But this is a burglary, you know, and I'm innocent, you know." And I just laughed and I said, "Well, you win some and you lose some, you don't." Well, we can laugh about some of those encounters and some we can't laugh about. I'd like to take a moment to tell you about some that occurred in what I call the worst day of my life in 1989 as police chief of San Jose. Two veteran officers, Gene Simpson and Gordon Silva, both near retirement, died on 5th and Santa Clara Street in what one would call an innocuous incident. At least the reporter from the Mercury News would call it that, but no police officer ever thinks of an incident as innocuous. Gene Simpson was supposed to be off that day, but he was working paid overtime. And I spoke to his wife afterwards, and she said, Gene loved the street. He was known as a very low-pressure guy who could de-escalate situations, and he told his wife, he said, cops get superstitious in their last couple of years of duty, and they get an inside assignment. And his wife said, he told me, don't ask me to do that because I love the street and I'll never go inside. That day, Gene Simpson saw a so-called homeless man who had been, according to the witnesses that we interviewed, acting strangely all morning. And what prompted Gene Simpson to stop we're not sure of, because when he tried to radio for a fill, for backup, the dispatcher, we had pretty primitive dispatching and not enough manpower at the time, said, no radio traffic, we have a felony car stop underway. So Gene Simpson never finished his transition. But as he approached this man, the merchants and other witnesses told us that this fellow had been acting strangely, stopping traffic, kissing the ground, going into Winchell's Donut Shop and other stores along the way and yelling at people all day. And what we speculate is that Gene Simpson saw this and went up to talk to the guy and was talking to him when suddenly the man started to struggle against them. Officer Simpson drew his baton, but this man who looked like, well, a pretty derelict homeless person had actually been All-Ohio halfback the year previously. And ironically, his father was a policeman in Ohio, but he had gotten messed up on drugs and his whole lifestyle was living in the streets. And the witnesses said he caught Officer Simpson by surprise with a punch, and he managed to grab Officer Simpson's gun. And Simpson ran behind a car. The cars were parked, parallel parking outside of the donut shop, and and ducked down and radioed for assistance, telling communications that the individual had his weapon. And Gene Simpson had an opportunity to run around the corner and to escape, but he didn't do it because he was a good cop, and he was really apprehensive that officers responding should know where this individual was with his gun. And the individual did fire a shot at him. Simpson still had the opportunity to escape, but he kept radioing in where the deranged person was, his location. And you can imagine 5th and Santa Clara Street in San Jose, calm, noon, sunny day, all police cars responding, and we had a videotape of it. And this is the world that cops live in. The pain of that day is so intense. Even now, as I talk to you about it, the students at Santa Clara University were doing a documentary with videotape on how the San Jose police were mistreating the homeless. And so we saw this guy run out in the middle of the street with Gene Simpson's gun. Unfortunately, a moment earlier, when Simpson kept trying to get his location instead of escaping to safety, he stood up behind a pickup truck which had a low truck bed. And the guy was right there, and he said, "Gotcha," fired one shot through Gene Simpson's head, killing him instantly. Simpson was wearing a protective vest, but it doesn't help your head. And so this wonderful policeman, who was noted for being able to de-escalate violent situations, died. Officer Gordon Silva was one of the many officers who responded, and he stood about 20 yards away and took cover beyond the mailbox as this man was out firing, emptying Simpson's gun at the other officers who responded, who fired back. And tragically, a shotgun pellet from one of the officers' weapons ricocheted 20, 25 yards and cut Gordon Silva's artery. And he radioed that he was hit. No one thought much of it. It looked like a little nick, but it was his femoral artery. And you have 2 minutes to die. They rushed him 2 blocks away to San Jose Hospital, and he died there. Gordon Silva was from the Hawaiian Islands and looking forward in a couple of years to going back, but in his off time he collected clothing for the homeless. And those are the kind of incidents that the Mercury News reporter has no inkling of. To try to understand a police officer's life, and that the dark angel of death is always there, just over their shoulder. But unlike ordinary people, when there are gunshots, the cops don't run away, they run towards the gunfire. And for that, we have to respect them and give them the right to defend themselves. Recently, we had the tragedy in Lakewood, Washington. 4 police officers with their laptops planning their shift in a public coffee shop, and a man came in and assassinated 4 police officers with a firearm without warning. It was an ambush. And I have to say, during my years with the NYPD as police chief in Kansas City and San Jose, I saw many officers severely wounded and killed. And that's something that they accept, we accept when we take the badge. But the penal code and the people understand that, and the penal code is written that the police can use necessary force to make an arrest. And it's quite unambiguous if you read the California penal code. So when the San Jose Mercury News talks about the idea that these started from minor incidents where police stopped people from for jaywalking